growing anger in Nigeria after another mass abduction. Hundreds of people have been taken captive in the north-central region. The government has launched a major rescue operation, but is it enough? And why do kidnappings keep recurring in this West African nation? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Frankie McCamley. Nigeria's nightmare is getting worse. Mass abductions have become a major security concern. In one of the latest attacks, more than 500 people were taken in north-central Niger State. In recent years, armed groups have kidnapped thousands of Nigerians, holding them captive and demanding a ransom for their release. The government is accused of failing to mount an effective response. So what's fueling kidnappings in Nigeria? Well, we'll talk to our guests in a moment. But first, this report from Imogen Kimber.
These people are being held for ransom. Captors released this video days after abducting roughly 500 people from mosques in 4 villages in Nigeria's north-central Niger State. President Bola Tinubu ordered a search operation. However, security forces often struggle to trace and rescue captives. And mass kidnappings have become common in northwestern and north-central Nigeria, with armed gangs frequently raiding villages, schools and places of worship. This woman's children were 2 of more than 60 children kidnapped in Borno State in May and June.
Gambo is 3.5 years old and my daughter is 8.5 years old. Please rescue our children so that we can be happy again.
In November 2025, more than 300 students and teachers were taken from another school in Niger State. In 2024, gunmen seized more than 200 students and staff in Kaduna State. And there were multiple kidnappings in 2021, with hundreds of schoolchildren abducted. Ransom money is believed to be the motive in most of these attacks. One Nigerian intelligence agency reports $5.8 million has been paid out in the past 12 months, although it says the total may be higher. Before 2020, kidnappings were largely motivated by ideology, including the abduction of more than 260 schoolgirls by Boko Haram in 2014. President Tinubu is under pressure to improve security. He's increased this year's defence and internal security budget to $4 billion. But kidnappings have not stopped. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
So let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Abuja is Kabir Adamu, the Managing Director of Beacon Security and Innovations Limited and a specialist in West Africa and the Sahel region. Kemi Okenyodo is the founder and Executive Director of Partners West Africa, a non-profit women-led organisation that works in governance security. She is in Pickering in Ontario, Canada. And Alex Vines joins us from London. He's the Director of the Africa Programme at the European Council on Foreign Relations. And a very warm welcome to you all to Inside Story. Kemi, I just want to start with you. We've just seen another mass abduction in Nigeria. Why, after so many years of dealing with this problem, the authorities in the country still haven't managed to break this cycle?
Thank you. I think the challenge with kidnapping in Nigeria is because it's become more of a pipeline for resourcing. Because most of the time ransom is paid. Closely related to that is that it's a reactive approach that we have from the state authorities. You have a scenario where one cannot see a proactive steps being taken to ensure that the next one doesn't happen. When we look at the locations of where the kidnappings are taking place, most of the time in rural communities, communities that share boundaries, hard to reach communities. And for as long as policing, security infrastructure and development infrastructure do not get to these communities that make it open and accessible, then we continue to have this challenge. those are my quick thoughts on this for now.
And we'll get into a lot of the details there too. Kabir, I just want to bring you in from a security perspective. Why are these groups still able to carry out these attacks on this scale, this latest kidnapping of more than 500 people? And in addition to this, Kemi there was just talking about the ransoms being paid in the last 12 months, reports of nearly $6 million paid out.
Yeah, so a combination of environmental factors, socioeconomic factors, and political factors. In this particular instance, it happened in Niger State, which is the largest state in terms of land mass in Nigeria, bigger than some European countries, bigger than several countries in Africa, occupying a land mass of about 76,000 square kilometers. Now, embedded in that land mass, forest reserves that cut across several states and that share border with neighboring Benin Republic. So allowing the criminal groups sometimes to crisscross and move around between these states and between the two countries. Added to that is the porosity of the border. The border security management is extremely weak. We can also add the very thin deployment and presence of security forces within the rural areas. Of course, I mentioned socioeconomic factors. Conditions there are quite disparate. So the citizens, the locals, unfortunately, sometimes have no choice in terms of the kind of protection that is at their disposal. In this particular instance, they targeted Friday during the mosque prayers. And then attacked about 4 to 5 communities where they rounded up this number of persons. We can also talk about the absence of a rapid response capability by the state. We've seen instances where these attacks go on for 3, sometimes 4 hours or even longer than that. So it's a combination of all of these factors that unfortunately have led to that. I would also want to add that we're dealing in this instance with several groups. And so there is a competition sometimes, unfortunately, for actions like that. First, because of the media attention it generates, it gives them, kind of increases their profile. So when one group carries out an attack, the other one would also want to carry out a similar attack, maybe even more than what the first one did, so that in terms of its profile, it increases. Some of them are affiliated with international sort of jihadist groups, either Al-Qaeda or Islamic State. And that level of activity will now increase their standing within the global jihadist sort of franchises that are available. So it's a combination of all of this that have led to it.
Yet a lot of different factors there. Alex, I'd like to get your take on that. Kabir just talking about environmental security, a lack of rapid response, and then even competition between these groups.
Oh, for sure. So, look, the fundamental thing is the lack of human security in particularly the Northwest, which is the epicenter for this type of kidnapping, but also North Central, which our previous speaker just spoke about, which is also massively impacted by this. And so these are areas that are very disenfranchised. They're very underinvested by the Nigerian federal state, but also the local state structures, very thin security engagement. So they are weakly governed, I think, by the state is the point. And the kidnapping has developed as an economy. And so we have these large-scale ransoms, but we also have protection payments. We have this multiple layer also with radicalized groups. The previous speaker mentioned them also. That's a problem also in the Northeast, which is about revenue generation and for rewarding supporters. So this is a growing problem, certainly in the Northwest and North Central. But kidnapping is a broader problem in Nigeria, although much more elite-focused in places like the federal capital, Abuja, and from time to time down towards the south in Lagos. So it's a big problem, and the Nigerian government is unable to deal with this. It is looking for international support to help it now, but the solutions are all, the fundamental solutions are all internal in Nigeria itself. And one thing that is extraordinary is also that the kidnappers do then put up on social media profiles for individuals to raise money for ransom payments. And so we should have a discussion about the efficacy of paying ransoms, because individuals do it, local communities do it, villages do it. The federal government also does it too, to get release of some of these large numbers of individuals that get abducted.
And Alex, you just touched on it briefly there, exactly who these people are that are carrying out these kidnappings. There are different radicalised, there's militant groups, and the word bandits gets thrown around a lot. Can you just inform our audience as to exactly what the different groups are?
Yeah, so organised crime, it crosses over to all of them. So radicalized Islamic groups are also tied to organized crime, and high-profile individuals that are kidnapped sometimes, certainly where there may be a value, might get actually traded from one group to another. So there's a kind of commoditization of kidnapping that takes place too, depending on how important they are. So you've got... and so the solutions to this are actually all about how to break organized crime and its grip. That's very challenging. UN agencies like the UN Office on Drugs and Crime and others are working with the Nigerian government. But the sad reality is that the Nigerian state forces too are compromised in this regard. Not only are they under-equipped, sometimes they are demoralized, but corruption is a big issue here too. So sometimes they are informed about turning a blind eye to some of these things. And so at the local level, it is very contradictory.
Kabir, I can see you shaking your head there. Do you disagree?
Yes, I think it would be unfair to sort of use the blanket word Nigerian security forces are compromised. From what we know, there have been, especially in the recent past, significant effort. And I must say that the British government supported the Nigerian government in establishing an anti-kidnap fusion center. And that anti-kidnap fusion center has been very effective in tracing and going after some of the, kidnap perpetrators. Now, we need to be very clear in terms of who these groups are. There are those that are associated with ideological groups, Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, and I can quickly mention the Lakurawas, the Mahmudawas, the Ansaru group, remnants of some of the other smaller groups that are still active. But you've got also the bigger ones, such as the Islamic State in West Africa province and its various sort of elements. You've also got the Jama'at al-Ahl-Sunnah lil-Dawati wal-Jihad. And more recently, you have JNIM sort of coming into the picture. So we need to be able to pick each and every one of this ideological group to understand sort of its profile, its footprint within the particular location that we're discussing. And then, of course, on the other hand, juxtapose the presence of the Nigerian security forces. And I think it's also important to put it very clearly that this particular administration has been very clear and emphatic in saying that it doesn't and it won't pay ransom. When this president, that's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was sworn in May 2023, he put up an article in the Time magazine that it was an op-ed, and he was very clear in that op-ed that his administration will not pay ransom. His officials have followed through, and I do agree there is a lot of chatter around the fact that there are some sort of backdoor payment of ransoms. But then it would be sort of unfair to categorically say that ransom is being paid by government officials, especially given the fact that the government has been very emphatic in that regard. But I agree wholly that the payment of ransom is part of the reason why we're seeing an increase in kidnap for ransom in Nigeria. But payment for ransom mainly by family members, by communities, and by individuals who, for one reason or the other, are exposed to the community. And yes, the responsibility to prevent that, to stop that, lies wholly.
Okay, Kemi, I can see you've been nodding there. What are your thoughts?
I agree with both parties. In my mind, I say that yes, the government has been clear about non-payment of that they wouldn't pay ransom. However, ransom is still being paid by individuals, by communities, and in some cases even backdoor. factor, as Kabir mentioned. However, when we say ideological groups, I ask myself, when we're talking ideological based on what? Because it seems more like a criminal network. If you look at the communities that are being targeted, there are communities that are vulnerable, there are communities that are hard to reach, there are communities that seem to have been forgotten by the government. Because if you go into these communities on a good day, the roads are not, they don't have roads, they don't have good roads, they don't have healthcare, they don't have the infrastructure of states that makes it have a sense of governance are not available in these communities. And then when we talk about porosity of the borders, I'm like, oh yeah, porosity of the borders, but then again, we know that our borders are a colonial legacy if you're looking at the external borders. But what about the internal borders, the intra-state borders? Who is supposed to man those borders? For as long as we do not bring the people that are affected into the center of the conversation that we're having to seek a solution to the issue of kidnapping, we seem most likely to still be running around in circles. And that, I think, is one of the core issue that we have here. Alex mentioned it, human security continues to be a challenge for us. Human security issues are not precisely being addressed in the process of trying to address the issue of kidnapping. So we have more of a militarized security, hardcore security response to it, and the human security dimension of it is not something we're paying close attention to.
Alex, I can see you nodding in agreement there.
Yeah, look, kidnapping and paying ransoms are a complicated issue. My own government here in the United Kingdom doesn't pay ransoms, but ransoms do get paid to free UK nationals, often through third parties with a nod and a wink. So you have commercial companies that do this. Private security consultancies specialize in this. Officially, it's not the government position, but there are other ways of doing it. So it's very complicated and very emotional. I mean, look, I have had Nigerian friends approaching me myself to contribute towards paying ransom of their loved ones. It is a real problem if you're living in the Northwest. And it's incredibly stressful. The solutions I think, are about strengthening state control and authority, getting better institutions, getting better development. I do tend to believe that it is fundamentally a human security governance challenge that we're facing here. And why are youth involved in these kidnapping gangs? It's because there are no alternative viable livelihoods for them. So it is good that internationals are supporting Nigeria in this regard. And we heard about the United Kingdom government supporting a multi-agency initiative to combat kidnapping that has been effective. I've seen some of the results of that. The European Union in February entered into discussions, including on how to help Nigeria be more effective in combating mass kidnappings like the one that you've just been reporting. So there are, I think, examples of where international partnerships can also assist Nigeria. But it is political will and prioritization in Nigeria itself that is key. And it has always puzzled me that this is particularly a problem of the Northwest and North Central and some other patches, and not other regions and states of Nigeria in the same way. And so I think that shows you that Nigeria is such a vast country with very many different ways of doing things. And so we should be looking at states where kidnapping is not much of a problem and ask our question, why is that and how is that? That's also, I think, something that we should be asking ourselves.
Some really good points there, Alex. Kemi, I just want to come back to you because you were talking there about the people that are being targeted and the rural communities they live in when there's barely roads there. Why are the poorest people being targeted? Also schools, mosques, religious areas. Why there when many people would think, well, actually, wouldn't these bandits or organised groups be going somewhere where there's money?
I think it's a bit of the getting government response. So when you have an entire community taken out in like 2 hours, 3 hours operation, the individuals become the chattel or the transactional tool to negotiate with governments, because the primary responsibility of the government at any level is the welfare and the security of its state. So when you have a scenario where an entire community is taken away, it means that the government has failed in fulfilling its primary responsibility to its citizens. It also sends a signal that these communities are vulnerable. So before you can get to the average where we say the money is, there are security apparatus protecting those individuals. We have the VIP, we have the police presence, you have the military, you have the DSS presence in the center of town. But when you come to these communities, you don't see those presence within those communities. So they become like sitting dogs, easy to move, easy to get, and also still flags the government as not fulfilling its responsibilities.
Okay. And Kabir, what happens when people don't feel protected is that they're turning to these vigilante groups. Now, do you think that this is complicating the situation more on the ground and increasing the problem?
So yes, one of the challenges, and I think it's very important to mention this, is the presence of small arms and light weapons, illicit sort of flow of small arms and light weapons. So the more sort of these vigilantes emerge, the more these weapons become accessible to different members of the community. Now, add to that mix the identity challenge that Nigeria has. Identity based on religion, identity based on ethnicity. And so you have instances where groups sort of seek to demarcate either land or location to protect themselves from the other identity that they believe are behind either the abductions or the killings. And in this instance, there is a particular group that has been associated with most of the banditry and kidnapping activities. And we see a lot of ethnic profiling, we see a lot of stigmatization associated with that group, even though it's a small percentage of that group that may be involved in that criminality. So yes, the challenge of access to weapons, the challenge of the rise of Vigilantism is adding to the problem. And I think one key element that sort of drives all of this, and it leads back to the point made by Alex around human security, is land governance. It is at the root of a significant percentage of the security challenge in Nigeria, where access to land, so unfortunately, is determined by certain factors that may put some groups at disadvantage. Add to that the desire to mine whatever it is that is embedded in that particular ground. It could be gold, it could be rare earth minerals, and some other forms of minerals that are available. So all of this makes, unfortunately, is leading to increased weaponization. It's also leading to the use of weaponry, vigilantism, to protect certain interests. And of course, embedded in all of that, is what I would describe as a highly mobile criminal enterprise, the ones that we earlier on called the bandits. They are able to move around between several states in the northwest, in north central, and in the northeast of the country.
Okay, I just want to focus on the solutions to this problem, in effect. The Nigerian authorities saying they're spending more on defence and security, raising the investment by 10% and recruiting 28,000 new soldiers. Kemi, is this the answer?
Not fully. It's a short term. That's a short-term measure. A short-term measure as an immediate. But the short-term measure be driven by what? Because we've identified that part of the critical issue are human security challenges. So when you put the soldiers on ground, what about the roads? What about water? What about development? What about infrastructure? What about putting permanent infrastructures in place for the people to feel safe and secure? That's not been answered. What are we talking about cross-border cooperation with the communities at the other side of the border that share affinity because they share affinity with each other. Most of the time, the cross-border communities, they speak the same language. They're the same people moving across, and that's why we say the borders are porous. But what infrastructure, what engagement are we having there, such that the people feel involved? Because they know a lot of times, in some cases, from our own experience at Partners West Africa, Nigeria, we know that some of the community people know when these attacks are going to happen. When they report, there is early warning. Now the early warning is there. What's the response mechanism that would
so it's
deter
that communication from the ground, that intelligence from the ground, all the way to the borders. I just want to bring Alex in as well. You're nodding there. You want to? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, Kabir mentioned it earlier. Obviously, a cross-agency cell like the one that the UK government has been also assisting in Nigeria building up is important. So all the different agencies actually talk to each other and kind of fuse the intelligence. Working with the neighbors is also important because clearly some of these organized crime groups have sleeping facilities in neighboring countries like Benin, for example. So there is that element too. And then, of course, there is follow the proceeds and follow the money. And so where there have been very large-scale transactions of money, following that is one of the best ways and kind of disturbing that. And UN agencies, Interpol and others can assist on that. Obviously, some of the local level stuff, which is often the ransom payments. I know of a case which the ransom payment was paid in fuel and chickens. That's a completely different prospect. So there are different layers of dealing with this. But getting agencies to be better informed with early intelligence, I think, is an important part of this. But also finding trusted people in communities to also play leadership roles, I think, is important. But this is dangerous stuff. I mean, there are community leaders that are also kidnapped, partly because they have protested against this stuff.
Yeah.
So this is not straightforward at all.
It is not, no. And like you say, communication from the ground, that intelligence from the ground all the way up to the borders, and that cross-communication. So much to be done and a lot to focus on. Well, thank you so much to all of our guests, Kabir Adamu, Kemi Okenyodo and Alex Vines. Thank you. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join in the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, Frankie McCamley, and the team here. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in a moment. Stay tuned.